They also had a diabetic complication of retinal neuropathy, and they were having injections because they were told they're going to go blind. So you have to have these injections to try and keep that at bay. And he went to his doctor, the eye doctor, to have the injection, which he always has at every appointment. And looked in his eye, looked in his left eye, looked in his right eye. I said, well, you don't need them today. It's 5 weeks into it. See you in a year.
Stephen, thank you for coming back. Last time we spoke, you mentioned how you were using carnivore to help people with kidney disease. I wonder if we could talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah. Well, firstly, thank you, Dave, for having me back. And I just want to take my hat off to you, or maybe try and take your hat off, because we're fighting the good fight, and we're trying to be shut down, shadow banned, and we're not allowed to say what we really think. But in the end, it's all about helping people, isn't it? That's the thing. And for instance, this kidney protocol, which is so successful for people, many people have said, you should sell this. You can make a lot of money out of this, and that's not what I'm in it for. I'm in it to make people better. All right. Yes, I do get a coaching call out of it, a consultation, but the idea is to make this available to as many people as possible, or at least give them the information, and then they can take that information with them. So if anyone wants a PDF, they can email me at the end, and I'll email out all the details. But anyway, what happened, because I've been doing bloods for a long time, I realised, and sorry if this is a little bit of a repeat of our last conversation, but for people that haven't seen it, I realised that a lot of the normative ranges weren't really reflecting what was happening in people's real health, and this way of eating didn't match the ranges, and there were some anomalies, and the biggest one was HbA1c, but I'm not going to go into that today. I did that in the last interview. But the eGFR, the filtration rate of the kidney, and that's because it's a calculation based on urea and creatinine, which are waste products of protein metabolism. So this way of eating tends to skew those numbers, and the filtration rate can look really bad, and sometimes it isn't. So the difference is quite stark. It can be under 60, which starts the flags going, oh, there's a kidney problem. And you do a different test, like the cystatin C test, cystatin C, cystatin, people that didn't get it last time. And that will give you a truer reflection of your filtration rate. So that's your first starting point. If people contact me, I don't immediately book a consultation, try to make loads of money. I tell them, try and get that test. I had this yesterday. My filtration rate is really tanking. Everyone's worried about it. What is the first thing I should do? This is just an email, and I said, get a cystatin C test, and then know exactly what your filtration rate is. Because protein comes into the mix, it makes a difference. And this way of eating, we eat more protein than normal, in inverted commas. So therefore, our readings are slightly higher with urea, slightly higher with creatinine, and that makes the filtration rate look worse. That's just the way maths works in this particular calculation. Right, so let's say they do the cystatin C test and it still shows the filtration rate is not where they want it to be, which again is sort of arbitrary as well, because many people, one really sticks out in my mind. Apparently my filtration rate is down to 5. And just to give people context, at 120, your filtration rate of your kidneys is amazing. Under 60s when they start worrying about whether you're stage 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, and 5 is way down. It's really bad function. And yet I feel amazing, it said in the email. So, even if the number is very bad, you still need that test, I think, the cystatin C. And most nephrologists, I think, have heard of the test, and hopefully you'd get it. Right, let's say you have got a problem. There is a protocol. There is a way of looking at what your kidneys do, and you can resolve it. And I get this happens. So one of the things is, what is the root cause? So you could have someone maybe have lupus and they can have nephritis because of that particular thing, or the main cause is diabetes, type 2 diabetes. That can be a big problem. So inflammation is a big part of why your kidney might not be filtering so well. So you look at the things that you can manage. What does the kidney do? Well, it cleans your blood. That's basically it. It produces waste, and it sort of manages your electrolytes. That's it in a nutshell. So that's what you want to do. You want to deal with what does the kidney do, and how can we make it easier. And that's just looking at the electrolytes like phosphorus and potassium, sodium, nitrogen, which is the breakdown of protein metabolism. Water is a big one, and glucose. So when you look at these things, the ingesting of those things, can we get it to a point where it's really sort of friendly for your kidney? So water, there's a big one. I had that again literally yesterday. I was coaching someone and they said, I can't believe the difference that reducing the amount of water that I'm drinking can make. It's incredible. So drinking to thirst rather than to a prescriptive 2.5 liters a day has made a huge difference. And it's really simple to understand. So if you've got this amount of water and you drink that amount of water, that is not compressible. That will become part of your body. It will go into your blood plasma and it will put your blood pressure up. And for those people that find that quite hard to believe, if you've ever been to the doctor and had your blood pressure read and it's a bit low, the first thing the nurse, the doctor, physician, whoever will, first thing they will say is, can you just have a glass of water and we'll redo it? Because they know it will put your blood pressure up. So this thing about 2.5 liters of water is potentially quite dangerous. It is drinking too much. If your urine is clear, then you're drinking too much water. It needs to be straw coloured because it's a waste product. You can test it yourself. I have no affiliation with this. You can get something like this, which are just strips that you urinate on, and it will tell you a thing called specific gravity, amongst other things: nitrates, protein, pH, ketones, bilirubin, glucose. But the thing I would be interested in is specific gravity, which is one of the things I was involved in when we did the private blood tests. All that is saying is, are there waste particles in urine, parts per million, however you want to look at it? That's why you have a slight straw colour, because there's a waste. If it's clear, there's not enough waste and your specific gravity isn't great. So, so water is a big plank of this protocol, not drinking too much, because your kidneys filtering constantly, minute after minute, second every second. So if you increase the workload by having too much water, then that's not good. Obviously, too little, your urine will be dark, and that's really important to stress as well. So it's not about limiting water, it's about drinking the appropriate amount, making sure that your urine is lightly straw coloured. That's it. Simple as that.
That's just if you're thirsty, drink, otherwise don't.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. If you think of how we talk about food, it's this ridiculous, you must have 6 meals a day. Well, what if you're not hungry? You know, or 3 meals a day and snacks. Well, what if you're not hungry? You know, it's common sense. Just drink to thirst. So that's it. And that will make a big difference before you start with your fatigue levels. If you're fatigued, brain fog, it will improve that. You know, and if people think, oh, it must be quite difficult to be overhydrated. The Boston Marathon, when they measure hydration afterwards, 11% of the runners are overhydrated. So they've ran 26 miles, all right, and they're still overhydrated. So you deal with that. You deal with the misconceptions about water, and then also you look at carbohydrates, carbohydrate intake, because, like I say, most people are with a kidney problem are diabetic, type 2 diabetic, at least pre-diabetic. And this is where I will bring in a couple of true stories where people have come to me. They've been on one was on peritoneal dialysis. The story's up on my website, and within 3 weeks they'd dropped a significant amount of weight, which would have been water weight mostly. But within 3 weeks, their doctor said, you could probably come off your medications now, off your type 2 diabetes medications. And in the 4th week, when we did a follow-up call with him, he was off his blood pressure meds. So it proves the concept, and it was also done with the doctor working in tangent. Now, that is really important, because if you do this way of eating all of a sudden and you are diabetic or you have blood pressure issues, you need to be really mindful of your medications. So you need to try and get your doctor on board. I won't say that they will be on board, because very often they're not. So you have to be really mindful of your dosing. Now, most people who are dosing any medications tend to know what they're doing because they're living that experience. So you have to be really careful. You don't want to go hypoglycemic. You don't want to have blood pressure go too low. So you just have to really, really be on it with your numbers when you first start. But like I say, people are sensible. I'm not a doctor. I'm not telling you to stop or start. This is just information how to manage it. And there's plenty of nursing websites that will back up what I'm saying about the EGFR. There's plenty of outlets you could look at this. So we're getting these results. We're getting people from EGFR of 14 up to 100. This is incredible. This is going from stage 4, stage 5 to no problem whatsoever. Not in 3 or 4 weeks, but it's huge turnarounds. And this has become a thing. I'm getting a lot of emails about this, and I just send out the protocol, always saying be mindful, of what you're doing because the medications are really important. So if people want the protocol, I will send it out as a PDF, and I'll put in black and white, very big writing about medications, because you've got to be mindful of that. Can't stress that enough. So anyway, right. So that's the thing. Once we realise what the kidney does, how we can help it, what we can reduce, we then look at what foods are conducive to this way of eating. So we've done the phosphorus, potassium, sodium, protein thing is a thing to be mindful of. So then we look at the foods that fit into that category, and guess what they are? They're mainly animals, mainly. Yeah. All right. So what I do is I tend in the protocol to say what is the general consensus opinion within the mainstream, and talk about maybe we could just tweak these a little bit. So, for instance, they will say chicken is actually quite good, I think, because of the low fat. But I say the whole chicken is probably better with the skin on, because you're still lowering the phosphorus, you're still lowering potassium, and it does make you feel full. And obviously, you need protein to repair the kidney and essential fats, and that comes on to fish. So fish is very good. You've got EPA, DHA, which are great essential fats, omega-3s, and the omega-6 to 3 ratio is great in fish. So that's really suitable for kidney health, very moderate phosphorus and potassium, and most people don't overeat on fish. It's not that sort of food. Believe it or not, beef can be considered a kidney health food. That's actually in the mainstream, believe it or not. But they always put the proviso, but there are concerns about the saturated fat. Not for me. I don't think there are. The proteins, the nutrients, if you get grass-fed, or even if you get grain-fed, you're still going to be okay compared to, say, walnuts, for instance. So if people are worried about, omega-6s or saturated fats, or linoleic acid tends to be a problem in some people's mind. Things like walnuts have 100 times, literally like 10 to 100 times the amount of linoleic acid compared to chicken. So chicken's not a problem. And then this is where the mainstream goes a bit off. They talk about egg whites are good because they're low phosphorus. Then they still have protein, but of course we know that whole eggs are much more nutrient dense and more bioavailable. This is where I have to hand in my carnivore card, because in the protocol there are things that are non-carnivore and non-low carb sometimes, I suppose, but yeah, maybe low carb and keto still would include this. So olive oil is okay, cabbage is okay, onion is okay, berries, garlic and ginger, even cucumber, and all those things fit the remit of low potassium. Good things to eat if you've got kidney problems and you're not carnivore. So I'm not pushing carnivore on anyone. I'm pushing kidney health, how to reverse it. But the funny thing, Dave, is when I get into the foods to avoid, they are on the list of things to eat. So there are a few things that just don't fit this protocol: asparagus and celery, and they're pushed because they're low in potassium. But what do people with celery do? They juice it. So the concentration goes right up of potassium, and it's not great. All right. Kale. What do they do with kale? They juice it. Right. They make a smoothie. Or quinoa. They make a smoothie. So they're still not great because of the anti-nutrients. And then you get into the antioxidant effect, which is the mainstream's love of antioxidant, the word antioxidant. So they will push red grapes, for instance, as great because they've got these antioxidant effects, but they're full of sugar. You give a diabetic or someone that likes sweet tasting things a bunch of grapes, that bag of grapes is not going to be there at the end of the week with just a few left. It's going to be eaten, and it's going to be eaten in front of the TV, and you're going to be thinking, well, that says it's good. Before you know it, you're like one of those old Roman emperors, lying on your couch having grapes fed to you by dusky maidens. So it's not great. It's not a great food for that reason. If you can eat 3 grapes, 4 grapes, great. Knock yourself out, fill your boots, as I say. But that doesn't tend to happen. Then we get into another one, which is apples, which is just, there's too much sugar in apples. It's just a bag of sugar. So one apple. Well, I've got an apple tree. Okay, maybe when it's seasonal and I fancy an apple, you could pluck it off the tree and eat it. I tend not to do that, but apples are not great. They're too sweet, basically. And then apple juice, obviously. So then you get in things like cranberries. Okay, great. Yes, UTIs, you have cranberries. They're great. They're not. They're tart. So you add sugar. So that's not a good food. Yeah, a cranberry may be on its own, but who does that? It's not very palatable. So it's living in the real world. Eggplants, green beans, keep away from those. Buckwheat, any grains really. And here's one that everyone doesn't like me saying, but watermelon. But it doesn't help because it can be very high in sugar. I mean, that's why they're popular. Cauliflower, although they're low in like sodium, um, there is good levels of potassium. And when you add them with all the other things, there's too much potassium coming in. Cherries, pineapple, and green beans. I don't want to bore people, right? But the reason I went through that list is when I do that with clients, and normally it will be a couple, because when people are doing home dialysis, you're impacting on the person you're living with or your kids or whatever, because it's awkward. I'll get a big laugh, and they'll say, "What?" And I'll say, "Why? Why?" I know now, but I always say it. Why are you laughing at the 10 that you shouldn't eat? See, well, because that's what you always eat. And this is so often. Oh, and I'm like, well, it proves the concept, because he's got a bad kidney or she's got a bad kidney. You're eating these things, so it proves the concept. So that was it really, and then I think going back to the bloods and the filtration rate, then you see the mainstream really quite surprised, because they go and get their readings and it's like, wow, this is fabulous. This has really changed. And, another one I was talking to did this protocol. They also had a diabetic complication of retinal neuropathy, and they were having injections because they were told they're going to go blind. So you have to have these injections to try and keep that at bay. And he went to his doctor, the eye doctor, to have the injection, which he always has at every appointment. And looked in his eye, looked in his left eye, looked in his right eye. I said, well, you don't need them today. It's 5 weeks into it. See you in a year. It's just like, wow. So we get
That's
this.
awesome.
Yeah, it's awesome. It chokes me, actually. So I just did this talk, actually, about this sort of thing at the UK Carnivore Conference, the first one ever, a couple of weeks ago. And I got a bit choked up on stage because I went through I didn't do sort of a sciencey thing. I went through a real stories thing. And I actually precede it with a story about Charles Dickens, because Dickens wrote a book, and at the beginning, Great Expectation, there's a graveyard and there's a family, and they'd lost 5 of their children. It's in the book. 5 of their children had died. And he wrote to his friend before he published the book and said, look, I actually saw this in a churchyard, but it wasn't 5, it was 13. It was 13 kids in this one family had all died. But it's too good or bad to be believable. I don't want people thinking I'm over-egging the story, so I only use 5. And I said, these stories are real stories, but they're so unbelievable compared to what the mainstream are doing. It's difficult to tell people, because like your reaction, like, wow, wow, wow. But that's why I'm sort of passionate and trying to spread the word that this way of eating can be really remarkable. I don't want people to be foolhardy. That's the biggest thing that does worry me. It isn't a case of just reading that and thinking, right, I can do that. Um, do speak to your doctor. Do look at your dosage of your medications, because you don't want complications from things getting better, but you're then becoming over medicated. So it's got to be mindful of all those things.
Have you had any doctors try to contact you and say, "What did you
No,
do to my patient? Why are they getting better?"
no, they don't want to know. I mean, that's the sad thing, isn't it? I mean, but this is sort of endemic across everything I've done for the last, definitely the last 5 years. As a carnivore coach, but I don't just, like I say, I don't just have consults and carnivore. I do low carb, keto, and even if someone comes to me and they're not eating anyway, in shape or form this way, but they want help, I will say, well, look at these foods. It's not low carb, keto, or carnivore. It's just good whole foods. And once you've got the knowledge, definitely, I think with the water, definitely with the glucose, and definitely looking at the amount of electrolytes that you're ingesting, you can change your health. You haven't got to do stupid amounts of cardio. There's no tracking to be done. There's no calorie counting, whatever you want to do. It's just about eating to satiety, eating when you're hungry, drinking when you're thirsty. As soon as you say it, it's not rocket science, is it? Drink when you're thirsty, stop when you're not thirsty, eat when you're hungry, stop when you're not hungry. I mean, it really is that simple. Try to avoid other things like too much exposure to your phone and your laptop, and get out and about and have a bit of activity. All good stuff, all good things. But in the end, it's simple. It's so simple. It's unbelievable. Um,
Well, the thing
yeah.
the thing we've done as humans is we've just complicated everything. I mean,
Mhm.
just as simple as eating and drinking, like you're saying there. When you're hungry, eat. When you're
Yes.
thirsty, drink. And we've overcomplicated it and made it this experiential thing where we got to do it all the time, or we've made up rules for ourselves where we've got to do it all the time, and we're just damaging ourselves in the process.
Yeah. And it's one of those stupid things I hear where, the doctor was, or the nurse or best friend, all well meaning. I don't think the nefarious will say, well, that diet's going to kill you. And that's on the back of the person saying, I've come off my meds for me diabetes. I've come off my blood pressure meds. I've lost a ton of weight. Everyone's saying I feel better. I don't need injections in my eyes anymore. Yeah, but it's going to kill you. And that's what the mainstream
But
do.
your cholesterol.
Yeah, yes, yes. Lower your LDL. And that, let's say I'm looking at 150 biomarkers and the lipid panel is in there, and everything improves. 149 markers improve, and clinical uh, symptomology, everything, how the person presents, all improves, and LDL goes up. Wow, there must be something going on. There must be something bad here. No, I think we're looking at it wrong. I think if everything else, if 149 markers are going the right way and you look and feel better and you're coming off your meds, I don't think that's a marker of anything other than your body needs a little bit of LDL to do some repair, or supply some energy, or take some fat soluble vitamins around. It's just absolutely ridiculous. And of course, with epidemiology, they've had 70 years, the people with that theory, to prove that that is a cause and effect thing, and it isn't. They can't prove it. And it all stems on fraud from the Sugar Research Foundation paying Harvard researchers to say that the problems with heart conditions is down to fat, not sugar. And that was the Sugar Research Foundation. All, all of public record. We all know this is true. And feeding rabbits cholesterol. This is where it all comes from. It's just ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean that rabbit thing, the sugar research thing. I was reading an article on it yesterday, but the rabbits thing is just ridiculous. It's like when we increase the cholesterol that's being fed to rabbits, they don't do so well, and it's like saying, well, when we feed humans concrete, they don't do so well. It's like, well, we're not meant to eat the stuff.
Yeah, I know. It's the old analogy of the lion looks at the cow and thinks, "Oh look, it hasn't got to do anything. It just walks up and eats grass. Maybe that's what we should do." And of course, 6 weeks later, all the lions are dead. And then the cows walk past the lions and think, well, lucky we didn't change our diet. We thought that looked really good. It doesn't seem to, it's a cow does not eat meat and doesn't go and kill things, and lions don't eat grass. Well, we're humans, and we're not supposed to be eating grass. We're supposed to be eating what we have evolved or been designed to eat, however you want to look at it. From the stable isotope testing, it's absolutely nailed on. At least 80% of our diet needs to be from animals and fats, and that's every continent over every period. When they do stable isotope testing, that's looking at teeth and long bones of remains, and then you can test the nitrogen 15, the carbons. You can look at the ratios. You can say, right, what did that person eat? You can even say, when you use teeth in particular, because they don't remodel and break down like bones do, that's going to give that person that died, that's going to give the whole lifespan of what they ate. So you can even say, when they were young, they lived near the sea because there's more fish, and as they got older, they moved inland and they ate more ruminants. And that's the science. That is actual science. Stable isotope testing is out there, and it's just proven time and time again. And I think if you do a Google search or a Chat GPT search, and you say, what did we used to eat? And I've actually done this. I wish I'd kept the screenshot. I have done it since, but it wasn't as good as the first time I did it. And I said, what did we eat as humans over different periods of time? They would say 80% plants and 20% animals. But if you interrogate ChatGPT, I actually did, and I said, well, that's not what I've found with my research. I actually got the reply, oops, yes, sorry, made a mistake. Yes, it is 80% animals. That, it's incredible, isn't it? I mean, that's the way the software is written, to send you a narrative rather than an actual answer.
Yeah, I found that as well. When you push back on some of the things that it tells you, it'll kind of it'll try and go around what you're saying, but then,
Yes.
it eventually will give in if you keep it up.
Yes. And if you give it enough, if you ask the right question, you'll get the right answer. So, another good one would be, what are the top 10 sources of iron from food? And if you do it in Google, you'll get all non-heme iron things. You'll get plants, basically. If you do it in ChatGPT and you say, well, thank you for that list, but none of these are heme iron, which is not the most beneficial bioavailable form of iron, the non-heme iron, the Fe+3 from plants. Could you tell me the most bioavailable form of iron from food sources? And then you start to get the right answers. And it's, who's going to do that if they don't know much about nutrition? They're not going to interrogate it in that way. They're just, and I've got that with clients. Somebody recently was, eating a lot of walnuts, for instance, and they're quite inflammatory. Got a bit of knee pain, and I just said, just drop the walnuts. Again, you will see, not 100% carnivore. I'm not like a zero tolerance guy. If they wanted walnuts, I was quite happy to let them eat them, but he was still getting the knee pain. Now, instead of just going, okay, Stephen, I trust you. I have booked you, so obviously I trust you. He did loads of Google searches and just sent me all this stuff about walnuts. I said, you're asking the wrong question, and also, you're not getting the answer to a question. You're getting a bit of propaganda, essentially, fitting a narrative. So you need to ask the right question. So I sent him a thing about linoleic acid and, the comparison between, say, chicken that's pasture raised and grain fed. And yes, the pasture raised was better. So we got this little graph of how much linoleic acid, which is the one that oxidizes and is not great. But then when you compare it to walnuts, 10 times as bad as inflammatory, 10 times. Again, so I think I convinced him. But it's just going back, say, for instance, the iron. It's really interesting that they will push the plants first. So that makes it difficult for your body to get heme iron, because your body has to convert it. There's a thing called vitamin C ferroreductase. It is involved in the process. And I suppose this is another tick box for less vitamin C in our way of eating is logical, because we're eating heme iron. I haven't really explained that very well, but when you ingest non-heme iron, so plants, it goes into your system, It's broken down a little bit by hydrochloric acid in your stomach, and then before it can enter the enterocyte, the posh word for your stomach lining, basically, or your small intestine lining, it has to, this Fe3 plus has to go through a vitamin C reductase thing, ferroreductase, and it needs vitamin C to make non-hemine into hemine, which is what the body can use. Well, we don't do that because our hemine goes whoop, straight through the stomach, straight through the duodenum, straight into the small intestine, and off you go. Happy as Larry. Ferrous iron, we can make it go into our small intestine and be used straight away without vitamin C. So it's just another thing where people say, well, it's all well and good, but I'm supposed to get more vitamin C. No, you don't need so much because there's so many things we're doing that don't need vitamin C. And that's just yet another example of how it's looked at incorrectly.
Just, Joe Average that goes on to Google or ChatGPT and says, where do I get iron or where do I get this thing? And they're presented with this list of vegetables. The other consideration is, like in the case of iron, they're not getting the correct form of iron, but also they're getting a lot of other anti-nutrients as well, right?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean that's the thing. You take calcium, for instance. Well, there are things here. Dandelions. I think dandelions are well known across the world. But anyway, so that's a plant, all right, and it has these leaves. When it's growing, if the leaves are flat, it's trying to touch the soil and get as much calcium as possible. And there's a lot of calcium in that plant because the leaves leave the soil. When they've got enough calcium, they go up like that. Okay, so this is where older people say, "Oh, you want some calcium? Pull that leaf out and chew on it. Right, you get some calcium." Right. Well, that could sort of be true, but the plant has fought long and hard to get that calcium. It's not going to liberate that straight away. So it's got oxalic acid. It binds to it. It keeps the calcium within the plant. That's what it does. So when you ingest a food that's high in calcium, that's a plant, it's not going to just give it up. And also, you get exactly what you just said. You get the thing that binds to calcium, and that's now in your system, taking calcium elsewhere because it's gone back to being like the leaf. Oh, I'm in a different environment. I need some calcium. I'm going to steal it. I've got some and I need some more, which is where you get this phrase. It's an anti-nutrient or, a plant toxin, however you want to word it. It isn't. It's the plant's clever mechanism to live. So everything in a plant is great at making plants because it's a plant. So, and everything in an animal is good at making animals because it's an animal. It's got all the things. So when you start to ingest plants, you're ingesting this thing that doesn't want you to have any of its goodness. It wants to keep it for itself. And again, it just seems to me so obvious as well.
So, in your opinion, plant-based advocates, is this something they've just overlooked, or are they ignorant, or they just don't care?
Well, firstly, I'm not anti plant-based advocates because at least they are trying to sort their health out. That's the first thing. So it puts them ahead of many people that can't even be bothered. Period. So I quite like that. Misinformation from the system, I suppose, going back into the sort of Google searches. If you're a plant-based advocate and you search top 10 sources of iron and you get all plants, yeah, it's the posh term, I suppose, is confirmation bias. You're looking for that information and you get it. So, like, oh, great, I'm doing the right thing. Look at that. Some of it, I think, is nefarious. I think they do know. I think some of the influencers know because when they're taking apart studies that don't agree with what their situation is, they can look at that. Oh, conflicts of interest. Look at that. It's absolute risk. It's relative risk. Oh, look at that. They're using relative risk. And so they know all the terminology. They know how a study can be manipulated until they get a study that fits with their picture, and they don't look at the conflict of interest, or they don't look at how they've worked out risk and all that. And I think most of them genuinely believe they're doing the right thing. I suppose, just to make it very broad, the one thing that I don't really understand is they constantly talk about being guilt-free. Their plate is guilt-free. There's no death involved in this, and that's just BS. It's just total rubbish. I have grown fruit and veg when I believed in fruit and veg, and it was like Fort Knox. My patch was, full of sprays and chemicals and nets and traps, and oh boy, it was everything. It wasn't like a Disney film. It wasn't, oh, I've planted my carrots and they are magically 6 weeks later without. It's just ridiculous to think that there's no death involved in growing plants. And, um, if you, and they are deliberately ignorant of that one fact, that they are killing animals to get their food. That's a fact. Even if they've got it in their own garden, and they are not spraying chemicals and stuff like that, um, they haven't lived their life like that forever. And the more you grow fruit and veg, the more the animal kingdom, cleverly, because it's the cycle of life, you'll get green fly, white fly, you'll get things in the soil that wants to eat your carrots. That will happen. You'll get animals doing what they should do, eating those foods. Well, you'll exclude them. So then, once you get into that principle, what does monocropping do? It looks at a patch of land, pulls up all the hedgerow, pulls up all the bushes, all the trees, gets rid of all the local animals. It completely decimates for one plant, for one thing that they're growing. Then they plant that thing. So they've already ruined the soil. They've toiled it, they've ploughed it, they've turned it over, exposed it to air. All those lovely microbes that were living, all the birds that were living in the hedgerows, and all the birds living in the trees, and the trees themselves, and the bushes themselves. They've all gone. You've got this desolate land. So then they fertilize it with whatever they want to fertilize it with. Plant one crop, which isn't going to attract any animals because they've been removed. And even if they do start to try and get in, there's going to be glyphosate, there's going to be chemicals being used. It's just, sorry, I'm leaning back, trying not to get too much of a rant going, but it's just so obviously not a good thing for the planet. It's certainly not a good thing for agriculture. It's not good for the soil. It's not sustainable, and they just turn their back on it. And you look at other things like bees dying, for instance. It's like 6 billion bees die in a 6-week period because they're being bought in to make sure that the avocado and the almond crops are going to be fruitful. So they're killing bees. Definitely, that happens. So all of those things together, to me, they are blissfully unaware of. I think they're definitely ignoring these terrible practices, which are not good for the planet, not good for the animals in the vicinity, and of course, it's not good for a long-term sustainable planet. What makes soil rich and fertile is animals, ruminants going across the plains, pooping, weeing, uh, eating, recycling, and then you get into methane, which over a 12-year period is completely recycled. Methane does not magically appear, when these animals are eating and then they're excreting, then they're going off, some of them obviously, to slaughter. The methane that's being released will then eventually go into the atmosphere, gets into the cloud system, gets into the rain, goes back into the soil, up into the plants. Bum, bum. The whole cycle takes about 12 years. There is no increase in methane. It is just recycled. Well, they seem to be unaware of that when they talk about cow farts and burps and stuff. Wow, how ignorant, reductive. They're just not looking at it. The whole biology of, well, the whole ecology of the planet is that circle of life. Sorry, it sounds like a Disney movie, but it is the circle of life, and you do have to have death, or it's better phrased as the life and non-life, because that's what happens. And then that life that's expired becomes a different life because it gets into the cycle. So everything is part of everything else. It's it's wonderful. It's a wonderful system, and humans are absolutely ruining it. And vegans and vegetarians are looking at it in the wrong way. They're not looking at the sustainability of the planet. They're looking at the sustainability of their propaganda, and that's a sad thing.
Right, yeah. I always kind of feel like, the they're well-meaning to a point, but then they just get into this. They get into this kind of cult where they're being used by the people who are actually making money out of this kind of thing, monocropping and stuff.
Yeah. They're useful
Mm.
idiots, and I hate that expression because it's too derogatory, but it does sum up for big food and big pharma. They are very useful. I don't think they're idiots. I think they're just misled, actually. But that's a term that people use. I don't like it very much, but they're complicit in it unconsciously, and it's really sad because the money's there. I mean, everybody knows what's good for you and what isn't. Like processed food is not good for you. If it's a box and it's got tons of ingredients that you haven't got in your kitchen, you'd never use. To me, that's a no-brainer. It's obviously not going to be good for you. And we've got all the diseases: diabetes, obesity, blood pressure, hypertension, whatever you want to call it. All of them increasing, and yet all the good things like saturated fat and beef and pork and eggs, the consumption is decreasing. What is increasing is the consumption of seed oils, consumption of plants. Um, so if you're going to get into epidemiology, which they seem to love, well, that's a big study. That's the planet. That's real people and real consumption rates. And the consumption of less meat, less fats, saturated fats, has led to an explosion of disease. Well, there you go. There's your bigger epidemiology study done for you, because you've only got to look out the window or go out shopping or just watch people being interviewed on the news. The pick off the high street. It's just really self-evident that these people are eating the wrong things. But of course, if Pepsi and Coca-Cola are sponsoring the American Diabetes Association to the tune of $3 million a year or something, well, the American Diabetes Association are not going to say don't drink Coke and Pepsi, are they? And you have to look at, well, why are these big companies sponsoring these things? Why are they putting the money in? Well, it's to get favourable press. Again, you don't have to be a rocket scientist. If I suddenly started investing in a thing, I would be doing it because I wanted to make some money. That's it. Yeah. Unless you
Yeah,
get,
yeah. Pe People don't just give their money away, especially corporations. They don't just give their money away.
no, they're looking for something for it, aren't they?
Mm.
You know, I mean, an individual investor is different. If I saw a brilliant thing that is going to help people and they need to get off the ground, I'd invest. Once you become a big corporation, you have to answer to your shareholders. So the CEO is not going to be able to stand up in front of the board of one of the pharmaceutical companies and saying, "Hey, look, I'm investing in a holistic approach to diet, so people can get off the medications we make." That's not going to happen. And actually, it's illegal. I think it's actually written in law that the CEO has to work in the best interests of the people that are shareholders. I think that's obvious as well, because you have to have a framework, and that's what they do.
Yeah, I think it'd be march straight to the front door after that press conference.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, yeah, it's pretty bad. So back on the back on the kidney related stuff. I mean, you've helped a lot of people. What kind of feedback do you get from those people? Like, because one of my students from a long time ago, she was in her 80s and her life was consumed by going to the hospital and being on dialysis. And
Mm,
whenever I saw her, it was always in the afternoon after she'd been to dialysis, and it was like she was exhausted.
mm,
And so like you're telling them, that list of foods that you've got,
mm,
maybe that's not the most correct list that you should have. Maybe you should try eating this stuff,
mm.
and everything changes for them. What is their reaction?
Disbelief. Disbelief. It's never anger, actually, which I often, well, I used to expect, but I've been doing this long enough now to realize that people do want to go forward, because it makes me cross to think that they could have been helped. I mean, one of the people was told he had 2 weeks to live in 2019, so obviously that didn't happen. Um, So you've got this awful removal of hope, actually. I mean, my own experience at 23, I was told I'd be in a wheelchair by 50, and I'm 60 now and I've been nowhere near a wheelchair. So you can be told things that take all your hope away. As long as you're a strong character and you think, well, there must be something the body can do. The body heals. We know that. You know, cut yourself, it heals. So why can't your other parts heal? Well, because what you're doing is not helping them. That's the thing. So if you cut yourself and your mum or your dad, don't pick that scab, it'll make it worse. Don't pick at it. Well, that's true. So with your kidneys, if the things that got you to have a bad kidney you still consume, you haven't got a chance, have you? So you would imagine they would be cross. In the main, I'd say right across the board, they're mystified that it's so simple. Obviously, very happy, skeptical still, because early days, it's like, wow, if it's this simple, sometimes things are so simple you think this can't be this simple. There must be a catch, So I think it's always, and it's one of those things that maybe for my business, I should use more like comments and emails and stuff like that. I think most of these people are quite private. I do ask sometimes, oh, well, that's a great comment. Can I share that? I don't do that enough, I think. But in the main, they're very thankful. It gives them their life back. Talking about dialysis, so, peritoneal dialysis is quite troublesome. So they have terrible sleep and the partner has terrible sleep. So that's a big one. It's like, oh, my dialysis is so much easier. The fluid management is just so much easier. It's incredible. So you get that. You get that mystified why the nephrologist doesn't want to know. Although that's changing now. I would say that. I'm going to, I like to give credit where it's due. The last one I had, he said, oh, I went to my nephrologist. First thing he said was, great, I can't believe the turnaround. You're like a different person. Secondly, whatever you're doing, keep doing. And when my client left, well, more like a friend now, to be honest. But anyway, when he left, the nephrologist shouted out, and don't forget to keep eating your protein. That's a nephrologist in a kidney situation where, the mainstream is avoid protein. I think they're beginning to realize that that's not true. And I think there is studies, and maybe I'm being a bit not giving them enough credit, because I think that is now becoming relevant, that they do realize that you do need protein to fix your kidney. It isn't protein that's the problem. Protein is a symptom or a signal if it's in your urine. That's what they're saying. But of course, if you're eating more protein, you will have more waste. You will have more waste, more nitrogen. When we talk about what is bioavailable, what does that mean? It means that more is going to your tissue and less is going into the waste. That's it. So if you're eating good quality protein, it's not going to come out as waste. It's going to make your kidney, which is a structure made out of protein and fats. That's what it is. That's what's going to happen. It's not made out of carbohydrates, by the way. So you've got this. Can't believe it's so easy. Can't believe that it's worked. Wow, I feel so good. I can sleep better. And it's never, why didn't I get this 20 years ago? Oh, I'm so angry. Which I think is beautiful. That just shows how forgiving people are. Because literally, I expect them to be angry every time, and they never are. They're just wonderful people. And I think that's also one of the unknown things, Dave, is the person's personality. I think we underestimate the power of positive thinking. I think if you believe something, and I know this is the placebo effect, but I don't care. If it works, it works. It definitely gives you an edge. I mean, one of the things I say quite a lot when we talk about this sort of thing is, if you don't think it's that important, I'll give you a thought experiment. Imagine I have got in my room twins, and they're going to run a 100-meter sprint, and you're going to bet on it. And you are allowed to talk to both of them, both the twins. And the first one says, wow, bet on me. I'm feeling good. I'm going to run this. I'm going to win this race. This is great. And the other twin, who looks exactly the same, got the same stats, said, oh, it's not my day today. Well, I don't think I'm going to win. I don't think. Well, who would you put your money on? So it's that simple, isn't it? I mean, it's definitely a part of it. And that's why I'm going back to the 2 weeks to live remark is that's taking hope away straight away. Wow. Imagine being told that. See, I feel goosebumps and quite sad about it to think that that was said 5 years ago to one of the people I deal with. Um, so yeah, a long answer. Sorry, I do give long answers, but I mean that it isn't a case of they all say great, thank you. There's a lot of different responses, but in the end, they're all saying, I can't believe how simple this was. I can't believe how quickly all my symptoms are getting better. I can't believe that I'm reducing my medications or coming off my medications, and it's just weeks, it's not years. I can't believe it. So it
Mm.
it's great. It's great to have that. It's nice to have comments. Obviously, the problem is now in this interview, it might be, oh, it's a magic wand. It's great. And there are other things that can stop you getting well. How you live your life, your activity, your mental health, the volume of food you're eating, when you're eating. So it's not just follow that list, but that list is a good framework to sort of build around.
So, Stephen, how can people get in touch with you? And also, if they want to get hold of the information you talked about earlier, how can they do that?
Okay. Well, the document's a PDF, so you can email me and you can say, I wouldn't mind having a look at that document. I am going to put a disclaimer at the bottom if it's going to be very public. Like, I'm not a doctor, this is based on my own personal experience. So you will get that, I'm afraid. But it is just a guide. It's just a guide. So you can email me at spelt out, by the way, not the number, zerocarb@gmail.com. Last time I was on your channel, someone said I didn't speak clearly enough. So I'd say it again, zerocarb@gmail.com. My website is on the screen. I don't know if that stays in your video, the ukcarnivore.com. I also have a community that I run with my co-host Richard Smith, the school community, which is the low carb school, which I can give you a link to put in the description. And that is a very inexpensive way to be part of a community and ask lots of questions. And we do a Monday hour live question and answer session every single Monday, and we do a half hour every single Sunday, 8 p.m. UK time. So you get a lot of value for just becoming a part of that community. Very small cost. At the moment, it's $4 a month, right? Less than $1 a week. You get all this support. More documents. We got like 9 different courses you can do about protein, about thyroid, all that sort of stuff. So it's a great community. Richard's, a fountain of knowledge. He's the Keto Pro, UK's top nutritionist, and all that sort of stuff. So you can join in and actually speak to me and get some sort of personal questions in if you wanted to do that. But anyway, that's how you do that.
No worries. Well, I'll add all those links in the description. And yeah, if you're not 100% sure what the email address is, it'll be in the description too. Okay, so you can click on that if there's any misunderstandings. But Stephen, thank you so much for coming back on again. I really appreciate you taking the time to share your experience.
No, thank you, Dave. It's always great to be on, and it's nice to speak to you, and I appreciate the time. Oh, can I just say one other thing? If this goes out quite
Sure.
quickly, there is a Keto Brain Health Conference coming up in October. I think I've got the dates. Let me just look, if you don't mind. The dates are the 19th of October in the UK, in the UK, in Manchester. Sorry about that cough there. And it's ketobrainhealth.co.uk. And if you use the code UK Carnivore, you get some money off booking that. And it's going to be a great day talking about how you can improve your brain health.